Hello and welcome to your one-stop for vehicle repair, restoration, and everything automotive. This is Burds Garage. Okay, so today at Burds Garage, we're going to jump back on Operation Mustang Fastback project car here, and we're going to continue to change some of the rusty sheet metal. So in our previous episode of Burds Garage, we changed the back third of the car with new and recycled sheet metal. Now we're going to work on the middle section here by changing the top cowl, the side cowl panels, the firewall, the dash, and also the floor pans. Okay, so I thought about long and hard. I wasn't too sure how I was going to approach this job, but I think what I'm going to do now though is I'm going to take out the frame rails and the aprons, just take this whole front section and disconnect it from the car, and that way I can actually send this out to the media blaster. I'm going to get all this cleaned up, and that way it's going to give us a lot more room to change the firewall and the cowl and all these other things that we got to do. And I think it's actually going to be much easier too, because we got a full floor section. We're not doing pieces, and that way we'll be able, once we're able to get some more room, we can actually move that up into the car, seat it where we want to, do the cowl and the other panels that we got to do. So I already re-leveled the car from where it was before, from our last job, make sure it's nice and square, and I took a bunch of different measurements just to make sure that we're going to get this front section back exactly where it needs to go. Then I also put some jacks in under the rockers of the car, so when I cut this out, it's not going to flex on me and actually fall over as well. So right now I'm going to break out the plasma cutter. I'm going to cut around where I need to get this front section out, and then we'll start looking at how we're going to approach the rest of the job. I also went ahead and welded in this cross brace to help keep these frame rails nice and square in the rear. Than I thought it was going to be. We moved the rear frame section on this car. It took a couple of days of planning and cutting and finally to get it out. This one only took a couple of hours, so definitely much easier than it was doing the rear. So we got a couple things to do before we can send this off to the media blaster. The first and obvious thing we're going to do is we're going to remove most of the suspension. We're not going to really use it anyways. These upper control arms and these other components are they're not good. They're going to have to be replaced. Anything that's loose we can take off. We can strip ourselves anyways. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to actually remove the sheet metal, these specific locations, because there's two flanges of metal here. So my intent is when I get this back, what I want to do is take this section and I can butt it right up to our new firewall and our floor, and that way it'll go right where it needs to go. We'll just have to do a little bit of measurements from side to side, make sure we're square, and then we'll be able to prep our holes in our new panels. We can go ahead and weld this new structure right in. So it's a good reference point to remove this, and then you only have that one layer of metal. Now, we're probably not going to use these rear aprons. Definitely not going to use the front aprons. We'll have to see what we're going to do, but I'm probably still going to leave these aprons on because they're the original factory sheet metal in the original location, and that way once we butt it up to there again, we'll have an exact position where we need to re-weld this section back in. I can't tell you how many old wasps' nests I found in this vehicle, but that's what happens when you buy a car that's been sitting in a farmer's field rotting away for a couple of years. Okay, so now that I got our front tub all prepared and shipped off the media blaster, we can turn our attention to removing the rest of the panels, and I'm going to start by removing this floor and these seat platforms. So what we're going to do is cut along this edge next to this floor pan flange, and we're going to remove the entire pan as one section, and then we'll come back and we'll find the spot welds. We'll put an X in them with a die grinder, and we'll just take a chisel and just remove them and remove the seam that way. Now over here with our seat platform, we're going to have to cut this piece away so we can expose the bottom of the floor. We have all new seat platforms and an entire new floor section, so no big deal. We can just cut this as we need just to get rid of it all. so you're probably wondering, why did I remove this entire floor pan? Well, it doesn't look too bad, right? So flip it over and tells an entirely different story. Way too rusty and, in my opinion, just not worth repairing with just separate patch panels. So that's why we tore the whole thing out. Okay, so I found with sheet metal flanges like this, instead of using a spot weld cutter, which can be real good to use sometimes, or sometimes it could be a problem to use, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the spot welds like this. I already found a couple on this flange. I'm going to put a couple of X slices into it with a die grinder, and then just take a couple of chisels and just whack that off. So once I remove all these flanges, what I'm going to do is just clean this up with a flat disc and get this down to bare metal so we can get our new pan in here. Now that I got my inner rockers all prepped and ready for the floor pan to go in, I'm turning my attention to the rest of these panels we got to remove out of this car. So what I really wanted to do is I wanted to take one panel off at a time and then put the new panel in and go to progressions of whatever else I needed to do. And that way I'd have my reference point still for the old panel versus the new panel, and it's really not working out that way. And the best way it looks like to get these side panels in and out, because we have to remove them from that hinge pillar as well, is we're going to have to take everything out, and then I can finish trimming all the rest of that inner side panel out from those hinge pillars, and then go ahead and just put everything back together one at a time. And that's why I have this bar in here welded in place. I have it for two reasons. First, I have it so I don't think this is going to move in and out these windshield pillars here. Maybe there's a chance of doing that. I don't think so, but anyways, just in case, I have this bar in here welded into each side so it doesn't separate or move anywhere on me. And secondly, I have it is because this is the reference point here, because I've got two flats on the top of this dash, and that's going to be our reference point for putting that new dash in. It'll help me locate it center to center, and it'll be at the correct height. So based on that, and this cowl and the lip of our dash only goes in basically one way because it has to be even when it comes off to this area, I think we're going to be okay. So I'm going to finish some cut that I have to do, and I'm going to go ahead and start getting this out of here and take this whole section out, and then I can work on finishing out our side panels and then starting to put everything together and get a game plan for how I'm going to put the rest of the sheet metal in place. You can see here I've started to separate my cowl from my side cowl here. There's actually an inner and outer cowl here for our upper cowl. You can see two distinct different panels here. Might be a little hard to see now, but once we put our new panels in, you'll be able to get a better idea of the inner and outer cowl and what they look like and what's entailed to put them in. So right in here I've started to separate everything from our pillar, and there's a bracket right here that goes on the inner side that mounts to that outer side of the dash here, and this is also part of our pillar, so I had to separate the two in order to keep this, because this is going to stay in the car. Now it's a good idea, like I said before, that when you do this kind of stuff, to have your replacement panels so you can see here and what we're going to put into the car. Now this area you'll see lays between this pillar for our hinges and up here at the top for our windshield. Not that bad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish taking these spot welds out, and I'm just going to lift this up and hopefully just be able to slide this in and be done. So now that I got that all the way, you can finally see then my windshield pillar areas with the bracket I was telling you about, and the rest of this inner side cowl we have to get out. So what I'm going to do now is just going to work on these spot welds. I'm probably going to use the cut method and try to pry it out so I don't have to drill on the other side, because I actually want to weld on this side, because I have to be real careful with the welds and never have to worry about it ever again. Well, here it is. Here's our brand new cowl we're going to use in our project. You can see our really old rusty one in the back. So the reason these cowls rot out so bad is because all the leaves will sit right into this hat area, and so what it does over time when those leaves and everything sit there, it just doesn't have a time to dry out, and it ends up just starting to rust away, and you end up getting holes and the whole thing rots out. But just to confirm what I said, so here's some video of the donor car I cut up at the junkyard where I got our dash out we're going to use for this project. You can see here that the leaves are just sitting there and all the debris, and it just rotted this whole hat area of the cowl away. Now unfortunately, if you got something similar to this, Even though the car looks good, you got to remove the cowl and just do an inspection, clean up all the rust, replace pieces, or our entire assembly that we're doing here. It's just part of the project of doing an overall thorough restoration. But if you do it once, you're never going to have problems again. You'll never have wet feet from water on the floor. So as I discussed earlier, there's actually two halves. There's a lower half and an upper half. So what we're going to have to do is weld this lower cowl in place first, and then we'll have to go ahead and do the upper cowl. So you can see this is where our side panels are going to meet our cowl panel here at the bottom. So what we're going to do is just make holes in here, and we're going to weld this once we get our side panels in. We'll weld this part of the panel to our side panel, and then our firewall is actually going to go up in here. If you see our top panel here, we actually have two mating flanges. This one meets our dash, and this one meets this surface right here on the other mating panel. So what we're going to have to do is drill holes in both sides so we can do our plug welds. Then I already have the holes marked where we're going to drill here. And once we weld that in place, grind the welds down, then we can weld this. We'll do our upper holes here where we're going to make and do our plug welds up at the top. Factory had about the spot welds every 2 inches, so that's what I did. I made a template. I made marks about every 2 inches of where we had to put our holes to make our plug welds. And I'm going to go ahead now, drill these out, prep them with some weld-through primer, and then go ahead and start fitting all these panels. But first we got to get these side panels in. So you can see here after some major cleanup, this is all I got left. Now our dash is actually going to be on this side, and then our lower portion of our cowl will fit on this side. So we're going to weld the two together, and then we'll have to weld the top panel on. But first we got to do the side panels. So here's the new side panels we got for our car, and I can just tell by trying to fit them in that we're going to have a lot of difficulty getting this area over into here. So I think it's a one-time get in there and that's it. You're not going to be able to get it back out. So because of that, I want to do my plug welds right here on this surface, because it's going to be easier to grind them down than it is going to be to grind them on the other side with this 90-degree flange here. So what I did is I made a template based on this surface, and I just put some tape on here and I applied it, and then I figured out where my holes are here. I'm going to make holes right in here to weld on this flange, and then we have to weld the bottom, and it'll be good. And then we can, once we get this into place, I'm probably not going to weld it first though. I'm just going to fit it in there and clamp it up, and then I'm going to start fitting the other panels, see how everything goes, and then we can do a final check and then go ahead and weld everything together. Now one good thing I'll tell you is this metal here and these new side panels is much thicker and makes it much stronger than what we're replacing, which is good. We always want to go with thicker panels if we can, make the car a lot more rigid and a lot more durable for long-term use in the future. So I just got my side panels on my one section of my cowl, and actually everything doesn't fit too bad. Now I definitely was right, I had to hammer these side panels in, and I don't want to take them back out, so I'm glad I put the holes in where I needed to. See the edge here, it's actually being a little too long, which is okay. We can actually just trim this down with our die grinder. So I had to make a couple of new holes from where I spaced it. Same thing over here, I missed a few, so I just made new holes. But this will actually, once we clamp this down, this will weld up really nice. Then with our cowl section here, the only trouble I had was just right in this area to try to get it seat all to the body properly. I couldn't get this surface, and this surface all to lay flat to each other. So what I ended up doing is just putting this slit in, and this will actually work this down and over, and then also I can just take this other section here and hammer that down, and then I'll just weld this line into place once I get all three of these flat, and you'll never know it's there. And a preliminary fit on my upper cowl, looks like everything fits pretty good too. Still have a little bit of issue in that one area here. I think I might have to split it also here, not too sure. I'm going to wait and weld this bottom one down first and get all these inner ones flush, and then we'll see how that fits, because this is supposed to be worked a little bit more, and it's supposed to lay flat and fit right up to this edge. Still looks pretty good. The other side looks really good though. This is almost where I want it. A little bit short here. It actually looks like the metal just might be a little short there. Should go up to here, but that's actually okay. Let me just add a little material here. Straighten out so it's nice and even and continuous. So right now I'm going to remove my upper and lower cowl halves, and I'm going to start welding in these side panels. So now that we have all our side panels welded into place, it's a perfect opportunity to fit our recycled dash that we pulled out of the 65 Mustang from the junkyard. We got all this room around here without the cowl in place, so it's a perfect time to do it. Okay, so I finished with our bottom cowl section. It's all welded into place, but I got some things I want to do first before I put the upper on and weld that into place as well. First thing I do is I want to put body caulk all in these areas where the hats here meet the bottom of the cowl, and that'll make sure we have a moisture tight seal, so any moisture water gets in here in the future. It's going to make sure it drains out on the side where it's supposed to. It's not going to get in between those two flanges and start rusting and rot out the cowl like our old one. Second thing I'm going to do is anywhere I bare metal primer, I'm going to put some weld-through primer on there. And then after this caulk sets up, I'm going to mask off our weld-through primer sections, and I'm actually going to put a coat of paint on here just to make sure this is all sealed and tight. I don't want to rely on this E-coat so much and for a long-term solution. And I guarantee you, wherever I was welding here, I probably got some solder balls or some flash or some grinding sparks into this. It probably burnt away the little primer that I can't see, and then it's going to, again, it's going to create some rust out in the future. Definitely don't want that. I want to do this once and never have to worry about it ever again. Before I do anything, I'm going to go scuff this with a red Scotch-Brite. So after taking the shine completely out of the E-coat and wiping everything down with wax and grease remover, now I'm ready to apply my body caulk. Now no science here, just apply it so you cover up this gap here. Just make it as flat as you can so the water can stream out still nice. Well, it's definitely not going to win any Autorama awards, but the goal is just to keep the water out between the two flanges. Now that my caulk's all set up, I can lay down some weld-through primer on the bare metal surfaces. Then next we can mask off the weld-through primer so we can lay down a little paint. Now that the lower half's all done and all the paint's dry, I can go ahead and put the top in and start welding it into place. So here what I'm doing, how I'm going to weld this, I'm going to weld the insides first and work my way out because it's flattest in the center. Once I get closer to the edge, the heat will kind of help it form itself down back to the lower cowl panel. Now here on my edges I got to be careful with the heat because I don't want to burn off that caulk and that paint I put around those cowl hats. So I'm just going to approach one weld at a time, blow it off so I can cool it down and then go to the next one. Welded into place. I'm ready to put the firewall in, but before I do that, I actually want to get this floor pan in because the floor pan actually fits above the firewall and the gap meets right here, and we're not going to be able to get this forward once we have the firewall in. Probably could, but it's going to be more difficult. Much easier now we have an open front end. So I'm going to go ahead and bring our pneumatic hole puncher and use that where I can. Otherwise, I'm just going to use a 4-inch drill bit and drill the holes that I need to be able to weld it into the car. This area right here I'm going to skip right now because our front force supports go in here. And I want to wait till I get this in the car and weld it, and then I'll put the supports in and I'll see where our holes need to go. And I can easily take these off and on and put holes in the floor later. So here is where our rear frame rail goes and torque box. So I want to do holes here and then the other side of the frame rail here. I want to make sure I get these now. It'll be too hard to do once you get the paint in the car. They actually have a nice indent here where the frame rail goes, right in this area, here and here, but measure first and make sure. So we just showed up from the Media Blaster. We got our front tub back and everything looks really good. I'm really surprised. I thought I was going to have a lot worse conditions with some of these panels than originally thought. The rear aprons here, they're actually in really good shape. I have 2 sets of these to replace these with, but they're really, really nice. They don't have any rot to them. I'm just going to leave them in place. The front aprons and the front core support, yes, definitely. I knew it had some body damage to it, and they have some rot, especially where this battery tray was, so we're going to have to replace it. A couple of things we got to do before we put this back in the car. I'm going to do all that here right now while this is loose. Right now I'm going to go ahead and get the tools out that I need. I'm going to start prepping to remove the core support and the front apron. is our bottom brace here of our core support, and this comes out too because it's all part of the replacement panel that I have. So what we're going to do is for here, and this actually looks really bad, but believe it or not, this is actually a factory weld. That's how they did it from the factory. You could even see on this side where they have the holes, just didn't care at the time. But anyways, so what we're going to do is we're just going to cut around here, and then we can just weld this back into place on our new panel, and then drill these spot welds out, and then finish the welds up at the top of our apron area, and then we're just going to go ahead and pull this core support out. Now that I got everything all cleaned up where my new aprons and core support's going to go, I went ahead and pre-fitted the new sheet metal, and everything lines up and fits great. Before I go ahead and weld all those new panels, and I want to fix up that's really important. These bumper bracket bolts are stripped out, so there's nothing here to hold our bumper in. So I went ahead and I made this new plate to mimic the old plate. It took me actually about 2 hours to dig this plate out of our frame rail. You can see here that the bolts are actually seized. They were broken off on the outside of the car. So I don't know why they use this whole full piece bracket like this. It could be just for reinforcement. So just in case, then I just kind of made my own reinforcement. Took 2 nuts, the same thread as those bumper bolts, and I welded them in the back. And I'm just going to put this in the frame like this. Get them to line up, and I'm going to just plug weld that all into place. And I'll also going to plug weld on the bottom, and I've got a new plate for this other side. So we're going to triple plate this box up for extra strength. Just mounting my firewall, make sure it's square on both sides. I went ahead then and I welded all the cowl panels to the firewall. I put a little epoxy primer on them. But I can't go ahead and weld my toe board into place. It's actually sitting too low right now. What I have to do is I have to position the height of this floor where it needs to go, and then I can burn the floor in, and then I'll bring that toe board up and then finally weld that, and we'll be all done with the floor sections of this car. So I already gone ahead, used my height from my rocker here and here to determine the height of my floor, and then I used the C-clamps on this edge, and I brought it into my rocker so everything's fitting nice and tight. Once I get this floor burned into place, which I'm going to do here in a few seconds, I'll use sheet metal screws to bring this toe board area into this floor, and then I'll go ahead and weld that. Finish of the floor pan and everything ground down flush, I'm going to bring my toe board up to the front of the floor, sheet metal screw it into place, and finally weld it together. As you can see here in this area, our floor doesn't completely match the contour of our toe board. It's got a huge space in it. It's no big deal. I'm just going to put a slicer or two with the die grinder in here and conform the sheet metal in so it matches the contour of our floor. I'd rather have more room in here if I need it for my powertrain, and I don't want to distort the floor on these 2 sides, because if you mash that in, the carpeting's going to look really weird. So I think that's the best approach. Now you can see the big improvement in how it drew everything together. So now all I got to do is just finish welding up the plug welds and also the 2 slits I made into the toe board. Now that I have the floor all welded and squared away, I can get these seat platforms in. Now how I determine where to put these is I use reference points from the drain holes in the old pan to the edge of the seat platform, and I'm just going to go ahead, duplicate that for the new floor, put these in, lock them into place, and then weld them. Okay, so now I got my floor, firewall, and toe board completely done. I'm going to get ready to put my front section in. So I'm going to move it over to the firewall, measure between the 2 frame rails, get it dead even where it needs to go, and then I'm going to go ahead and clean it up, put some weld-through primer on it, take some more measurements, reference the dimensions I had when I took it apart, and also the level, make sure everything's completely square, and then go ahead and burn it into place. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start prepping to put these floor supports back in. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drill the holes on this side and then weld through here, because I think it's easier than trying to weld the underside and here and under the car. And that way we don't have to do a super nice job cleaning these welds up. We can make them level. They don't have to look real pretty. You're never going to see them when you put the carpeting over it.
So you can see here, this is the finished results. I got all my holes ready so I can weld my floor support in, and I also went ahead and drilled the holes that I need so I can weld the back of my frame onto the floorboard here. The other side where the aprons are, I'm just going to go ahead and weld them the opposite side. It's too hard to reach up into here.
Now I get all that out of the way, I'm going to install these subframe connectors. Now, not original to the car. We'll make sure that any kind of powertrain we decide to put in our Operation Fastback definitely be able to handle it better, make the car a lot more rigid. Now, these do come with hardware, but I'm going to weld them in place. Not only does it make that a little bit stronger, but it's going to look like a more factory appearance. The rear of the subframe connector just locates right where that hole is for the leaf spring, so I put the bolt in and tighten it down just to hold it in place. Now for the front, we're going to have to use a floor jack to help seat that frame connector against the floor support, but it'll also hold it in place so we can weld it. We're getting really close to finishing all the sheet metal on our 65 Mustang project car. But we have one big problem to take care of, and that is these big spaces between the toe board and our inner rockers. So I'm going to fill that space and I'm going to install torque boxes in the car. Now, torque boxes are not factory correct for 1965, but we're going to go ahead and put them in anyways. Same reason we put these subframe connectors in. This is really going to add to the structural integrity of the car, making it a lot stronger, because what they do is they actually tie the inner rocker, the floor support, the firewall, and the frame rail all together. That corner then was a weak point on these earlier cars for 65 and 66. They started putting the passenger side on 67, then in 68 Mustangs, they had a torque box at the passenger and the driver's side. So again, this is really going to help the strength of our car. Now, I've done these before, and I think it's much easier to install them in two pieces than it is one. Now, you can actually buy these as one piece, like that, or you can buy them as two separate pieces. These actually were one piece, and I got a good deal on them, so I ended up separating them myself by drilling out the spot welds. Now, this area here, this is going to go against our side cowl, and our floorboard is going to come right along in here. So this is going to fill that area just nice, and what we can do is just weld that. The floor is going to go right down in here, and we'll just weld it all the way on the bottom. So this part's got to go in the car first because it fits against the firewall and the toe board. So this is what I'm going to fit in the car right now, weld it in place, and I'm going to go ahead and put the bottom half in. So these upper plates fit pretty well. They just pop right in there. A little bit of persuasion, get them right where they need to go, and go ahead, and this is how it looks, weld it all into place. And then I put some paint in there before I put that lower plate in, because you're not going to be able to get to it once you got everything all welded together. And the same thing here. This area you're not going to be able to get to once you weld that lower plate in. So here I'm just putting some paint down, help seal all that up so we don't have to worry about any rust or corrosion issues here in the future. Now, those lower plates, much different story than the upper ones. It's a persuasion to try to get them to fit right in on both sides, but a little bit of hammering and a little bit of pounding, we finally got them in there. Now we're also going to go ahead and put these gusset brackets in. Now these are reproductions of the factory correct brackets for 1968 Mustangs. So these will weld in and fit perfectly right where they're supposed to go, and also increase the strength of this area. So I can't believe we're finally done with the sheet metal work with Operation Fastback. I think we really turned this Mustang back into a Mustang. I can already hear the roar of the engine and the squeal of the tires as we're cruising down the highway at 70 miles per hour. But I know we got a long way to go and a lot of things to do before we get to that point. So continue to follow Burds Garage as we take this classic car and turn it into a modern muscle car. And as always, thanks for watching, good luck with your projects, and remember, it's not a rewarding day unless you get dirty.